Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very empowering show coming right up with special guest Brian Ridgway, and he's here today to share with us his new book, Break Your Self-Help Addiction: The 5 Keys to Total Personal Freedom. Now, Brian is a #1 international best-selling author and is the founder of Level 5 Mentoring. He's known by tens of thousands of readers and clients in 84 countries as the Spellbreaker. Brian says he's not a healer, guru, or spiritual teacher, but a reminder of who and what you always were and always will be. So let's welcome to the show, Brian Ridgway.
Aloha, good morning.
Well, good morning, good evening. I guess it all depends on what part of the world you're in, right?
All right. I'm working with all time zones for sure. Yeah.
I'm sure you're such in high demand. I'm so glad that we have this time to talk about your new book, Break Your Self-Help Addiction. I have to ask you, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I have everybody has their story. I have a really unusual story, even among unusual stories. It's in a way 2 stories at once, and I've discovered how to share it fairly briefly. So on one side of the story, I lived a life in hell from birth until about 17 years. It was a very unhappy home, a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, a lot of abuse, and that's an understatement. And so for those first 17 years, I learned that life was just a place of suffering and that I wasn't loved. Love wasn't reliable. And again, understating here, we can get deeper if you want to. But then around the second story comes in around 2 or 3, I noticed that when I was communicating with someone outside of my family, anyone that I met, child, my adults, my parents' friends, I could basically see through them in a way. Now, I didn't know that everybody wasn't doing it, but I caught on fairly quickly that everybody wasn't. I was able to see how people were holding themselves back and how they could let go of how they were holding themselves back. And so throughout my miserable life, where I couldn't make my own life work, I was always able to help other people have incredible breakthroughs and changes and epiphanies. And so around 17, 18, I got into self-help at a very early age. And because I was suffering so deeply, I didn't see self-help as an interest or a luxury. It became pretty much my life. I spent the next 30 plus years, hundreds of thousands of dollars, thousands of hours working on myself, trying to make my life work. And I just nothing worked for me. And so I ended up hitting this point of absolute surrender, January 3rd, 2011, 46 years of living in hell. And I surrendered completely. I had been studying quantum physics. I understood that everything was energy, but I couldn't make it work. And in this moment of completely surrendering and giving up, I woke up and I stepped out of the idea that everything is one and everything is energy, and all those seemingly woo-woo concepts became literal reality for me. And I instantly, after following that moment, I was inspired to start that gift that I had of helping people. It made sense now in this context of waking up to the fact that everything is energy. And I ended up, after about 4 years of helping, I had probably helped about 50,000 people around the world by that time. So many people were asking me, saying, Brian, I've never seen results like what you get. I've worked on myself for decades, but I've never seen anything like your work. Could you put this into a simple book form where we could absorb it and use it? And so it was really the request of so many people was what the final thing that inspired me to write it. And what inspired me to write that book was I wanted to write the book that wasn't available during my 30 years of self-help, when I basically spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, tried everything, and was still stuck at the end of it.
Do you think that you had to walk that path so that you can gain the information, the knowledge you had that brought you to where you are today?
Absolutely. For me, there's no question about that. And the fact that I've had the ability to help people And I mean, we can talk case studies and all that stuff, however you want this conversation to go that'll serve, your listeners the most. But to really make it simple, I was already helping people to have results and breakthroughs and insights unlike anything they'd ever experienced before I had the breakthrough. But I believe it was me going through this hellish life and really having the extent of suffering that I did that made the brightness of the awakening experience so much infinitely more bright, and has brought me to a place of just absolute, unlimited, unconditional love for everybody, total compassion for everybody, no matter what they're thinking or doing, even if it's, quote, to me. And yeah, I don't believe I'd be able to do what I'm doing at the level I'm doing it had I not gone through that.
Well, I know you talk about the self-improvement trap. What is that? And why is it something that we really need to be aware of?
All right. That is truly one of my favorite questions to play with. And it is also, a lot of people find it really surprisingly controversial. And here's why. I just want to be clear from the outset that I'm not knocking or criticizing another human being. If I were to do the work that I'm doing and say what I'm saying and then knock another human, then everything I say would be moot. It would be disproven, basically. So I'm not knocking anyone. I'm simply saying that if we are truly infinite, unlimited being beyond time and space, which we are, quantum physics has proven now what the seers of all time knew, that we are infinite, unlimited energy in a state of infinite possibilities, and ultimately we're all one. Well, if that's the case, then we can't actually improve. And we created the self-help industry. Each of us, infinite, unlimited beings, created the self-help industry as the ultimate trap to keep us stuck, so that when we reached finally for, okay, I think I've suffered enough here in this time and space realm, I'm ready to break out, we would have an endless labyrinth and gauntlet of seeming solutions, none of which were complete, so that we could get so frustrated on our way out of this that we could really have the ultimate experience that we came here to have as infinite, unlimited beings disguised as humans. And, for me that's like a 3-minute answer to really a 4-hour question, but that's a great summary for those that are ready to hear it.
Well, I thought that was a perfect summary because I know that that's kind of a tough question. And hey, I mean, we talked about this. I mean, I think a lot of times when people look at this, they may get the wrong impression in some ways because, I mean, I kind of had that same, initial, kind of knee-jerk reaction where it's like, well, hey, self-help addiction, I'm not quite sure about that. Let's talk about this. And I'm glad that we're diving into this discussion.
Well, I'll take a liberty with a question that you didn't exactly ask yet, but is kind of implied. If we take one step back and we look, what do people who are very active in self-help and have been active for years or decades, what do they call themselves? It's self-help junkies. And there's a reason for that. And what is a junkie? A junkie is someone who's gotten addicted to something and they're constantly going back for a fix. Once they get addicted to trying to get their needs met through it and it doesn't last, they keep having to go back for a fix. Well, there's a double entendre when it comes to self-help, because self-help is about fixing yourself. So you're literally going back for another fix. So there's kind of a joke in that. And I was working with my publisher on the book, and the content was there. It was all written. And we were like, okay, what do we call this thing? And I tossed out the title as a joke. And this lady has been involved with over 400 bestsellers. And she said, that is the title for your audience. That's the one right there. Yes, you could come up with a title that would give your book a broader appeal. But for your exact audience, that is the title, because they do unconsciously see themselves as self-help junkies. It's not an accident that term is the one that they use. And why is it that people get addicted to self-help? Well, that's a whole deeper question. But if I'll kind of wrap this up by saying, in the last 9 years since I've been doing my work, I've touched and worked with over 120,000 people. The vast majority of them say the exact same thing to me when it's all said and done. I've worked on myself for years or decades. I've spent 5 or 6 figures, and I was still stuck in the deepest areas that mattered most to me. And I encountered your work, and I actually got to the roots for the first time. And the reason is because I'm pointing to what the self-help industry as a whole will not point to. And there's a reason for it. Not knocking anybody.
Well, with that in mind, you talk about surrender. And is that a real big piece for you as you're moving through just kind of reclaiming your life in many ways?
Yeah, I would even say that ultimately surrender is the final ingredient, and virtually everyone has a slightly to very twisted understanding of what surrender means. Most of us are caught up on the connotations that we have of the word, and that's true of a lot of words, much more than the actual meaning of the word. And so I so far haven't seen an exception, and I'm not sure there is one. The answer to waking up and being absolutely free lies in surrender ultimately. But it's not a surrender against something bigger than you. It's surrender to the fact that you're all that is. The real you is all that is. And so, yeah, I'm not sure that it is possible. I don't want to make it an absolute here, speak dogmatically. There's no way out but surrender, but that's basically true.
Well, in your book, you talk about spells. And, I think for someone picking it up, they may be a little surprised when they see that. And I'd love for you to share with us what that means.
Beautiful. That's a perfect question. Again, one of my favorite things to ever talk about. So, being that I had worked on myself for over 30 years, and just again, self-help wasn't a luxury. It wasn't an interest. It wasn't some side pursuit. I was suffering so deeply. The emotional trauma, the physical trauma that I went through as a child was so intense that me getting myself fixed as I saw it in those, at those times, was life or death. I had to make my life work, and nothing worked. And I was watching all the other people that were going to the seminars and the courses and the, programs, the year-long coaching program, and they were all being as positive and as hopeful as I was. But when it was all said and done, they all pretty much said, yeah, it was amazing, but my deepest stuff didn't get touched, right? And so I was constantly looking for, why is that? Why is that? Why is that? When I started doing my own work, these people were coming to me, and I was like, why am I hearing the same thing over again? I've been working on myself for years or decades, and nothing seems to work. I keep thinking it worked. I go to the seminar, and at the seminar, I'm rah, 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 yay, everything's changed. And I get in my car, and it's like, oh God, nothing changed. It's because of the spells that we're under. And we all have a skewed idea of spells from the nursery rhymes and the Disney movies that we saw as kids. When I say a spell, here's what I mean. A spell is a set of mental, emotional, and physical conclusions that are literally frozen in the mental, physical, and emotional bodies. Now, for those who accept the reality or the possibility that we're all energy, that everything is energy, then just let your mind be curious about how that could work. And there's also simple, practical, say more mainstream ways of understanding this. All of us, we don't behave from what we are. We behave from our identity. There's a lot of people out there working on beliefs, but beliefs don't get anywhere near to the root of what's going on here. A lot of people work on emotions, but emotions they're just the glue of what's holding it all together. Some people work on their wording and trying to create new habits. But if you don't get to the roots of the roots of the roots of what is actually causing your unconscious behaviors, bringing about your results, no matter what you do, you'll never solve them. I like to say you can, because I help a lot of people with money and business issues. You can take every money course, every business course, every investing course, everything about how to change your mindset about money. But if you don't deal with the spells underlying your behaviors, emotions, actions, and speech, it's not going to change. You're just going to have temporary relief over and over and over again. So that spell is the combination of everything you think and believe that you know on that topic, vast majority of which is unconsciously determined in your moments of trauma, pain, confusion, unconsciously picking up from someone else. And the catch is that those ideas and conclusions that you unconsciously reached about your deservability, about your lovability, about men, about women, about sex, about relationships, about money, about what you should have and what you shouldn't have, wound up with the emotional pain of our childhood. And those things actually create and weave our beliefs, our ideas, our identities all together into our paradigms on every topic. And that's what dictates our results, not our conscious actions or conscious efforts. So until you handle the underlying spells, you can do all the inner work you ever could want to do. You can take every course and every program and every seminar, and those fundamental things will not change because you haven't addressed the roots of them.
So I understand they call you the spell breaker, right?
Yeah, a client kind of tossed that out one time, said, "Yeah, it's like you took me out from under a spell," and it stuck. That name's been there ever since.
Well, that's a pretty cool name, to go by, especially when you've had the experience that you've had. Because I think why people gravitate to you so much is that they can really resonate. It's like, hey, abusive father, a horrible work experience, whatever the case is, they're in this horrible life experience. And they're looking for ways to get out, to move beyond this. And, maybe trying all the self-help things and going, gosh, you know what? I'm still miserable. So none of this is working for me. How do I move beyond it?
Right. And what one of the things that happens in that loop is because I've worked with some really powerful, amazing people. Mitch Russo is a client and now a friend of mine. He was the president of Business Breakthroughs International. So Tony Robbins teamed up with Chet Holmes several years ago, late great Chet Holmes, and they formed this, Tony's transformational work and Chet's brilliant business mind. They formed this company called Business Breakthroughs International. And Mitch was the president of their company for the duration of it. And then a couple of years ago, he heard about me, and I was a little bit woo-woo for him, or so he thought. Oh, that's a little far out. We did a session, and a financial issue that he had been dealing with for his entire life, including through all of his work with Tony and Chet, that never got addressed. And so he ended up coming out working with me in Hawaii. And he's, so the people like that would have said, now that's just too far out, but they end up finding out, wait a minute, if we're all told that the universe is a physical machine, that Newtonian paradigm that's taught in all the universities and all the schools for the last several hundred years, that tells us that we're little chunks of meat in a giant machine, it's false. If it's true that the energy paradigm is actually the truth, and I've been living from the Newtonian physicality paradigm, then which one's actually woo-woo? Deepak Chopra, I wish I had come up with this term, but he calls it the superstition of materialism. The idea that nearly everyone believes that we're physical beings in a giant physical machine that's bigger than us with powers outside of us is false. And everybody believes it. So they see the energetic truth as woo-woo, but it's the exact opposite. So virtually everybody's struggling against the illusion that they believe, trying to make that work, when the only answer is to actually surrender to the truth that we are energy in a giant endless ocean of energy in a state of infinite possibilities. And suddenly everything gets easy. And one of the things that's working for me right now, frankly, is the pandemic situation of fear, everything that's going on. A lot of people who were very skeptical about these things before are saying, wait, this other stuff isn't working. Let me look at what Brian's doing over here. And a lot of minds are opening.
So I'd love for you to share with our listeners your thoughts around the word miracles, because I know you have some pretty profound thoughts around that.
Yeah, and I just would say for anyone listening who would prefer to be living a more enjoyable, miraculous experience, just like I tell every client that I work with, you don't have to take my word for anything. I don't even recommend I don't recommend you take anybody's word for anything, including your own, because how's that worked for you so far, right? Just be curious when I say this. The belief in miracles keeps you forever imprisoned in suffering because Einstein said it really well, but he didn't quite explain it. Einstein said, we can only live our lives one of two ways. We can either live our life as if everything is a miracle or as if nothing is a miracle. Now, I see a lot of people, and I poke a lot of fun. I see a lot of people who hear quotes like that, and they'll create a meme and share it. Oh my gosh, look at this great meme. Let me share this. But they don't actually stop and look at it to figure out, what is this thing actually saying? Do I actually care? And what he's really saying, I see that it escapes almost everybody. He's saying there's either one endless miracle or there are no miracles. The idea that there are miracles is a misunderstanding brought about by the fact that almost all of us, almost all the time, are so brainwashed and we're so operating from the shallowest part of ourselves that on the rarest of occasions we peek through and notice what we call a miracle. But the reality is that if we were to rise into the state of awareness that's available to all of us, we would see the one endless, ever unfolding miracle that we are, that is all that is, and that we are literally a seamless, not even a part, because we're not part still implies separation, but we're it. There's one flawless, ever expanding miracle, always ongoing behind the scenes. And will we release our knowings and let ourselves be behind the scenes to recognize the miracle that we are and that we're experiencing? That's how I see it.
Well, I'm glad that you took the time to explain that for us, because I think a lot of times people they look at it, go, well, this is a miracle, but this isn't,
Right. Right. And that causes us to resist that which was part of the miracle, which prevents us from experiencing the entire miracle.
Mm. Yeah, that can get into a whole mind twist right there, right?
Big time.
Well, why don't you briefly go over just kind of for us? I know that you have 5 principles that you've developed for personal and financial freedom. So why don't we just list them and maybe go over one of them?
Yeah, I love that. So what I have done is, people like frameworks and people like systems, people like tool sets. And that can be so beneficial and so helpful. And I have been fine-tuning this set of the 5 keys over the course of several years. And what I find when I have a short conversation with someone, really the best way is for me to zoom in on one. And it's pretty much what you're asking. So it boils down to being present, first and foremost. It's becoming present, because when you become present, you actually see what is. You can see what is. And along that way, settling your physiology into pure balance, then assuming what I call assuming benevolence. And there's a few different ways of speaking about this, but it's always holding the awareness and always reclaiming the awareness that what's happening is happening for me. This is me happening for me. And I invite people, especially since we're being so brief about it, just kind of letting that in for a minute. Like, what if everything that is ever happening is happening for me? And then breaking the spells that have been holding us prisoner for the entire time, dissolving those spells, and then continually, the last step is just continually expanding that, continually expanding what we've opened, continually expanding that. And so what I'm gonna go into one primary key here, which is this assuming benevolence, or the idea of assuming that the universe is actually me working for me. And this will probably be, with a couple minutes left, this will be the biggest gift that I can give to anybody that's going through anything tough that would like to be more free right now. So we've all heard, many self-help authors and teachers and gurus have said, nothing happens to you, it's happening for you. But most people can't quite make that leap when it comes to something like a pandemic or a lockdown or the so-called loss. I don't literally believe in the word loss. For an infinite, unlimited being of energy, there cannot be a loss. But for those who believe they're physical, it's going to seem like a loss. They're going to perceive a loss. Loss of a loved one, loss of a child, loss of their job that they've been working at for years. People find it extremely difficult to see that that is happening for them, to assume benevolence or to have blessed perception. So here's the way to do it. If you will accept the possibility that you are energy and that the universe is energy and that you're not separate in any way, shape, or form, you are a wave. Oh, you picture the ocean for a moment, and then here's the ocean. Now here's a wave. The wave forms and moves and crashes, and it's gone, and it's part of the ocean again. Was there ever a wave? You could literally look at yourself, your identity, and your body exactly the same. The ocean of consciousness is forever waving. And you are a wave that rises, goes through your aging process, and fades right back into the ocean. But you never stopped being the ocean while you thought you were a wave. You just got born into a society that programmed you to think you were a wave, and you tried to save your waveness for as long as you possibly could, which makes you suffer. Now, what if you were to remember, I am this ocean that I'm waving in? Then what could be against you? The oar that slices through you as the boat crosses, it doesn't harm you. You're the same eternal ocean you ever were. You begin to see, if I am a wave that is an aspect of the one ocean of consciousness that's eternal and flawless and perfect forever, well, then what could I lose and who could harm me? The only one that could be harmed is this illusion that I call me, that I'm so desperately trying to cling to when it's artificial in the first place. So just take these two words, anybody that wants to: blessed perception, perceiving that I'm always blessed and I'm always being blessed by all that is. And to be curious when anything happens, I'll give you a tool you can use anytime, all the time. No matter what happens, if you'll sit down and ask the question, how is this happening for me? What are the possible benefits for me of what's happening right now? It will literally take you out of any perceived tragedy or problem. And don't be surprised if you start to recognize the miraculous side that you were just talking about. Don't be surprised if you start to see and experience the miraculous side of it. So that's my shortest possible rundown, I think.
Well, do you know, Brian, thank you so much for giving that rundown to us. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. Where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your book, Break Your Self-Help Addiction, and be part of your community?
Thank you for asking that. Well, right now, I'll tell you, there's a lot of things happening, a lot of volatility in social media and all. I'm going to give, I have a group on Facebook. I'll just give a couple quick links here. These are real easy. If you look on Facebook for the group Unconditional Happiness, Unconditional Happiness, we have several thousand people in there. I give away pieces of my paid programs. I provide a lot of support. I do Facebook Lives in there a lot. Lots of people really enjoying that. And then I have a project right now that is super near and dear to my heart that's benefiting a lot of people. And the website for that is easy as well. It's globalinrising.com. Global Inrising. So it's the opposite of an uprising. And last thing, I want to take a liberty because I literally just put the finishing touches on a presentation that people have told me I don't want to sound self-promotional, but this is really to get something out there, and it is totally free. I've had people for years telling me that my free webinars gave them more benefit than a lot of the paid programs they've done. And I just finished the most powerful free webinar I've ever done. And it's available at livinginonenessnow.com, livinginonenessnow.com. Everybody's heard about oneness. When you go through this webinar, it's more of an experiential thing. I actually help you to feel and drop into that experience of oneness on this free webinar. So I feel like that'll be very beneficial and helpful to a lot of your listeners that are curious. I appreciate you giving me an open space there to share those things.
Of course, Brian. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It's been great.
Well, thank you, Brian. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you, and of course, to talk about your new book, Break Your Self-Help Addiction: The 5 Keys to Total Personal Freedom. Break Your Self-Help Addiction's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and select indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And of course, it's available on Kindle. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Mary Ann. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Mary Ann airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.